The cafeteria fell silent as I stood up, my lunch tray scattered across the floor, mashed potatoes dripping from my new sweater. 20 pairs of eyes stared at me, some with pity, others with cruel satisfaction. But what they didn't know was that beneath this quiet exterior lived a storm they were about to witness. Which country are you listening from? Tell us in the comments below. My name is Maya Thompson, and 3 months ago, my world changed completely when my family moved from our predominantly black neighborhood in Atlanta to Millbrook, a small town in upstate New York. My father, a mechanical engineer, had received a promotion that required relocation, and my mother, a registered nurse, found work at the local hospital. They were excited about the opportunities this move would bring our family. I was 17, a junior in high school, and honestly, I was terrified. In Atlanta, I had been surrounded by people who looked like me, who understood my struggles without explanation. I was class president, captain of the debate team, and had a solid group of friends who had my back. Moving to Millbrook meant starting over in a place where I would be one of maybe 5 black students in the entire school. The first day at Millbrook High, I walked through those doors wearing my favorite purple cardigan and my lucky earrings, small golden hoops my grandmother had given me. My hair was styled in natural curls that I'd spent hours perfecting the night before. I wanted to make a good impression, maybe find my place in this new environment. But from the moment I stepped into that hallway, I felt the weight of curious stares. It wasn't just the normal new student attention. There was something else in those looks. Some students whispered to each other as I passed, and I caught fragments of conversations that made my stomach tighten. Is she the new girl? Where do you think she's from? She looks different. I had spent my entire life being proud of who I was. My parents raised me to understand my heritage, to know the strength that flowed through my veins from generations of ancestors who had overcome unimaginable challenges. My grandmother used to tell me stories about her mother, who had been a teacher during segregation, and how she had fought for her students' right to quality education despite the system working against her. But here in Millbrook, I felt like I was carrying the weight of those stories alone. My first few classes went relatively well. Teachers were polite, if somewhat formal, and I managed to answer questions correctly when called upon. I had always been a good student, honor roll, advanced placement courses, college-bound with dreams of studying journalism at Howard University or maybe Columbia. During lunch, I sat alone at a table near the window watching other students laugh and chat with their friends. I pulled out my phone and texted my best friend Jasmine back in Atlanta. First day survival status, questionable. Missing you already. She responded immediately, you got this, Maya? Remember who you are. Queens don't bow to peasants. I smiled at her message, but the loneliness still felt overwhelming. In Atlanta, lunch was my favorite time of day. My friends and I would discuss everything from the latest episodes of our favorite shows to our plans for college. Here, I felt invisible and hypervisible at the same time. That's when I noticed a group of girls at a nearby table staring at me. Their leader appeared to be a blonde girl named Brittany. I had learned her name during roll call in my chemistry class. She was pretty in that conventional way that seemed to matter so much in high school, with perfectly straight hair and clothes that screamed, "My parents have money." She leaned over to her friends and said something that made them all laugh while looking in my direction. I pretended not to notice, focusing instead on my turkey sandwich and the homework I was trying to finish. After school, I walked to my locker to gather my books. The hallway was mostly empty except for a few students heading to after-school activities. I was organizing my backpack when I heard footsteps approaching. "Hey, you're the new girl, right?" It was Brittany, flanked by 2 other girls I didn't recognize. "Yes, I'm Maya," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady and friendly. "Maya," she repeated, as if testing how the name sounded. "That's interesting. Where are you from?" "Atlanta," I answered, wondering where this conversation was heading. "Oh, the South," she said with a slight smirk. "That explains a lot." I felt my jaw tighten, but I maintained my composure. "Explain what?" Nothing," she said quickly, but her tone suggested otherwise. "It's just, you seem really different from the girls here. Your hair is so unique." The way she said unique made it clear she didn't mean it as a compliment. I had encountered girls like this before, the type who thought they were being subtle with their microaggressions, who would later claim they were just being friendly, if confronted. "Thanks," I said simply, not taking the bait. "Are you planning to join any clubs or sports?" one of her friends asked. "I'm thinking about it. I was on the debate team at my old school and I practiced martial arts." "Martial arts?" Brittany's eyebrows shot up. "Really? That's so unexpected." Again that tone. That subtle suggestion that somehow martial arts didn't fit with their perception of who I was supposed to be. I've been practicing karate since I was 8, I said, feeling a spark of pride. It's taught me discipline and confidence. Karate, she repeated, and I watched as she exchanged glances with her friends. Like in those movies? I could feel the conversation shifting into dangerous territory, but I tried to stay positive. It's actually a beautiful art form with a rich history and philosophy. It's about respect, self-discipline, and— Oh, I'm sure it is, Brittany interrupted. Well, we should probably get going. See you around, Maya? As they walked away, I heard one of them say something about thinking she's tough, and they erupted in giggles. I stood there for a moment, my hands trembling slightly as I finished packing my bag. That evening at dinner, my parents asked about my first day. I told them it went fine, but I could see the concern in my mother's eyes. She had dealt with similar situations when we had moved to different neighborhoods before, and she had a sixth sense about these things. Remember, baby, she said softly, you don't have to shrink yourself to make others comfortable. You are exactly who you're supposed to be. My father nodded in agreement. And if anyone gives you trouble, you let us know. We didn't move here for you to be treated poorly. I appreciated their support, but I also knew that I needed to figure out how to navigate this new environment on my own. I couldn't run to my parents every time someone made a comment or gave me a strange look. That night, I lay in bed thinking about my dojo back in Atlanta. Sensei Williams had been more than just a martial arts instructor. He had been a mentor who taught me that true strength comes from within. He used to say, Maya, the techniques I teach you are not for fighting. They are for living. They will give you the confidence to walk through the world with your head high, knowing that you can handle whatever comes your way. I had earned my black belt just 6 months before moving to Millbrook. It had taken years of dedication, countless hours of practice, and a mental toughness I didn't know I possessed. But more than the physical techniques, karate has taught me about inner peace, about finding calm in the storm, about standing up for what's right even when it's difficult. Little did I know that I would need those lessons more than ever in the coming weeks. The real problem started about 2 weeks into my time at Millbrook High. I had been trying to find my place, eating lunch alone but focusing on my studies. My grades were excellent, and I had even answered several questions in class that impressed my teachers. But this seemed to irritate some of my classmates rather than earn their respect. It was a Tuesday morning and I was walking to my locker between classes when I heard someone call out, "Hey Maya, wait up." I turned to see Jake Morrison, a tall boy with sandy brown hair who played on the basketball team. He had seemed friendly enough in our shared history class, so I stopped and waited for him to catch up. "Hey," he said, slightly out of breath. "I wanted to ask you something." "Sure, what's up?" "Well, you know how you mentioned you do karate and stuff?" He glanced around nervously. "Some of the guys and I were wondering, can you really fight? Like, could you actually hurt someone?" The question caught me off guard. I mean, I've been trained in self-defense, but karate isn't about hurting people. It's about discipline and— Right, he interrupted. "But like, if someone messed with you, would you go all kung fu on them?" I felt a familiar knot forming in my stomach. "Jake, that's not really how it works. And it's karate, not kung fu. They're different martial arts." "Whatever," he said with a shrug. "Same thing, right?" Before I could respond, Brittany appeared beside us as if from nowhere. "What are you guys talking about?" "I was just asking Maya about her ninja skills," Jake said with a grin that made me uncomfortable. "Oh, this should be good," Brittany said, crossing her arms. "Show us something, Maya. Do one of those karate moves." "I'm not going to demonstrate martial arts techniques in the hallway," I said firmly. "That's not appropriate." "Come on," Jake pressed. "Just a little something. We're curious." A small crowd had started to gather, drawn by the conversation. I could feel their eyes on me, and I recognized that familiar feeling of being turned into a spectacle. "I'm not performing for anyone," I said, trying to keep my voice calm but firm. "If you're genuinely interested in learning about martial arts, I'd be happy to talk about it sometime. But not like this." "See," Brittany said to the growing crowd. "She's all talk. Probably doesn't even know real karate." "I think she just watches too many movies," someone else chimed in. I felt my face growing hot, but I maintained my composure. "I need to get to class," I said, turning to walk away. "Running away?" Jake called after me. "That's not very ninja-like." The laughter that followed me down the hallway felt like daggers in my back. I held my head high until I reached the safety of my next classroom, where I slumped into my seat and tried to focus on the lesson. But this was just the beginning. Over the next few days, the comments escalated. In the cafeteria, I would hear whispers about the girl who thinks she's a ninja. In the hallway, students would make exaggerated martial arts poses when they saw me coming. Someone even left a fortune cookie on my desk with a note that said, "Ancient Chinese secret?" The casual racism was relentless and often disguised as jokes or curiosity. Are you good at math because you do karate? Do you bow to people at home? Can you break boards with your hands? Each comment felt like a small cut and they were adding up. I tried to ignore them, tried to rise above, but it was becoming harder and harder to maintain my composure. The breaking point came on a Friday afternoon. I was walking to my locker after school when I heard loud voices coming from around the corner. As I approached, I saw Brittany and her group of friends surrounding a younger black student, a freshman named Marcus who I had seen around school but hadn't spoken to. "So do you know karate too?" Brittany was asking him in a mocking tone. "Are all the black kids here gonna be ninjas?" Marcus looked terrified. He was small for his age, probably no more than 14, and he was clearly overwhelmed by the attention from these older students. I don't know karate," he stammered. "Really?" one of Brittany's friends said. "Maya told us all black people from the South know martial arts. Isn't that right, Maya?" I froze. They had seen me coming and were now using me to torment this younger student. Marcus looked at me with a mixture of hope and fear, probably wondering if I would help him or abandon him to save myself. "I never said that," I said firmly, stepping closer to the group. "And you need to leave him alone." "Oh, look who's here," Brittany said with fake sweetness. "Maya, we were just asking Marcus about his ninja skills. Since you two are probably friends." The implication was clear. They assumed we were friends simply because we were both black. In a school of over 1,000 students, they had decided that the handful of black students must all know each other and share the same experiences. "We're not friends," I said, looking at Marcus apologetically. "We don't know each other. But that doesn't matter. You still need to leave him alone." "Or what?" Jake had appeared with several of his basketball teammates. "You gonna karate chop us?" The group laughed and I could see Marcus shrinking further into himself. This was exactly the kind of situation that had made me afraid to move to Millbrook in the first place. "I'm going to report this to the principal," I said, pulling out my phone. "This is harassment." "Report what?" Brittany asked innocently. "We're just having a friendly conversation. Right, Marcus?" Marcus looked between us, clearly torn between agreeing with them to make them go away and standing up for what was right. Just leave me alone," he whispered. "See," Brittany said. "No problem here. Maybe you should mind your own business, Maya." As they walked away, still laughing, I helped Marcus gather his scattered books. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded, but I could see tears in his eyes. "Thanks for trying to help." "I'm sorry that happened," I said. "And I'm sorry they dragged me into it." "It's not your fault," he said quietly. "They've been doing stuff like this since the first day of school. I just try to stay out of their way." As I walked home that afternoon, I felt a rage building inside me that I had never experienced before. It wasn't just anger at Brittany and her friends, it was fury at the entire situation. At being made to feel like an outsider in my own country. Watching a younger student being tormented while I felt helpless to stop it. At being reduced to a stereotype and having my heritage mocked. That evening, I called my grandmother in Atlanta. She had always been my source of wisdom and strength, and I needed her guidance now more than ever. "Grandma," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I don't know what to do." After I told her everything that had happened, she was quiet for a long moment. "Baby," she finally said, "let me tell you something. I've lived through segregation, through the civil rights movement, through decades of people trying to make me feel less than. And you know what I learned? Sometimes you have to show people who you are, not tell them." "What do you mean?" "I mean sometimes words aren't enough. Sometimes you have to let your actions speak for you. But you do it with dignity, with pride, and with the knowledge that you're not just representing yourself, you're representing all of us who came before you." "But Grandma, I don't want to fight anyone. That's not what karate taught me." "Child, there are many ways to fight. There's fighting with your fists and there's fighting with your spirit. You need to decide which one this situation calls for." That night, I lay in bed thinking about her words. I thought about Sensei Williams and all the lessons he had taught me. I thought about my parents and the sacrifices they had made to give me opportunities. I thought about Marcus and all the other students who might be going through similar experiences. And I realized that I had been approaching this all wrong. I had been trying to avoid conflict, trying to keep my head down and wait for things to get better. But sometimes, keeping your head down just makes it easier for people to step on you. It was time to stand up. The weekend gave me time to think, but Monday brought fresh challenges. Word had somehow spread about the incident with Marcus, but the story had been twisted. According to the rumor mill, I had threatened Brittany and her friends, claiming I would use my karate on them if they didn't leave me alone. I first heard about this distorted version of events when I overheard two girls talking in the bathroom during the first period. I heard she got all aggressive and started making threats, one said. That's so scary, the other replied. I mean, she probably knows how to seriously hurt someone. I wanted to correct them to explain what had actually happened, but I knew that would only make things worse. Instead, I finished washing my hands and walked out with my head held high. But the damage was done. Throughout the day, I noticed students giving me an even wider berth than usual. Some looked at me with fear, others with suspicion. A few teachers even gave me strange looks as if they had heard the rumors and were wondering if I was some kind of threat. During lunch, I sat alone as usual, but this time the isolation felt different. It wasn't just that I was the new girl anymore, now I was the new girl who was supposedly dangerous. Hey Maya. I looked up to see a girl named Sarah approaching my table. She was one of the few students who had been genuinely friendly to me since I arrived. Hi Sarah, I said, grateful for any normal human interaction. Can I sit with you? She asked, glancing around nervously. Of course. She sat down but kept her voice low. I heard what really happened on Friday. With Marcus and those guys. My heart jumped. What did you hear? My little sister is friends with Marcus. He told her what actually happened. How you stood up for him and how Brittany and her friends were the ones being awful. I felt a surge of relief. Finally, someone who knew the truth. I wanted you to know that not everyone believes the rumors, Sarah continued. Some of us can see what's really going on here. Thank you, I said, meaning it more than she could know. That means a lot. But Maya, she said, looking concerned, you need to be careful. Brittany and her friends, they have a lot of influence here. Their families are well connected in town, and they're not going to let this go. What do you mean? I mean they're going to keep pushing. They're going to keep trying to make you look bad until you either fight back or leave. And honestly, I'm not sure which one they want more. Her words stuck with me for the rest of the day. Was this their plan? To make my life so miserable that I would either lash out and prove their point about me being dangerous, or simply give up and ask my parents to move again. That afternoon, I decided to walk home instead of taking the bus. I needed time to think, and the fresh air helped clear my head. I was about 3 blocks from school when I heard footsteps behind me. Maya. Wait up. I turned to see Jake jogging to catch up with me along with 2 other boys from the basketball team. What do you want, Jake? I asked, not bothering to hide my exhaustion. Look, I wanted to apologize for the other day, he said, slightly out of breath. I was just joking around, you know? I didn't mean anything by it. I studied his face, trying to determine if he was being sincere. Okay, I said carefully. Apology accepted. Great. He seemed relieved. So we're cool? We're fine, I said, starting to walk again. Actually, he said, falling into step beside me, I was wondering if you could settle a bet for us. Here we go, I thought. What kind of bet? Well, Tyler here thinks that karate is basically just dancing. And I told him it's actually pretty serious stuff. So could you maybe show us a few moves? Just to prove my point? I stopped walking. Jake, I already told you I'm not going to demonstrate martial arts techniques for entertainment. Come on, Tyler chimed in. It's not entertainment. It's education. We're genuinely curious about the art form. The third boy, whose name I didn't know, nodded enthusiastically. Yeah, we want to understand your culture better. My culture. There it was again, the assumption that martial arts were somehow inherently connected to my racial identity rather than simply being something I had chosen to study. Karate isn't my culture, I said firmly. It's a Japanese martial art that I've studied for 9 years. It has nothing to do with my being black. Oh right, Jake said quickly. I didn't mean it like that. I just meant, you know, the culture of karate. I could see where this was heading. They were going to keep pushing, keep asking, keep making me feel like I had to prove myself or explain myself until I either gave in or lost my temper. I'm going home, I said, turning away from them. Come on, Maya, Tyler called after me. Don't be like that. We're trying to be nice here. Yeah, the third boy added. We're giving you a chance to show us that you're not all talk. I stopped walking. Slowly I turned back to face them. All talk, I repeated. Well, I mean, Tyler said, suddenly looking less confident, you talk about karate a lot, but nobody's ever seen you actually do anything. And people are starting to wonder if you really know what you're talking about, Jake added. I felt something shift inside me. It was like a switch being flipped or a dam about to burst. For weeks, I had been trying to be patient, trying to be understanding, trying to rise above the comments and the stares and the constant microaggressions. But now they were questioning my integrity, calling me a liar, daring me to prove myself. "You want to see karate?" I asked, my voice deadly calm. "Yeah," Tyler said eagerly. "Just a little demonstration." I looked at each of them in turn. 3 boys, all bigger than me, all blocking my path home, all expecting me to perform like a trained animal for their amusement. "Here's your demonstration," I said. In one fluid motion, I dropped my backpack and assumed a ready stance. The transformation was immediate and complete. 9 years of training took over, and I felt the familiar surge of confidence that came with knowing exactly what my body was capable of. "Whoa," Jake said, taking a step back. "I didn't think you were actually going to." I didn't let him finish. I launched into a kata, a choreographed sequence of movements that demonstrated various techniques. But this wasn't the gentle, flowing demonstration I might have given to younger students at my dojo. This was sharp, powerful, and precise. Each movement was executed with the kind of intensity that comes from years of dedication and months of suppressed frustration. I moved through blocks and strikes, kicks and stances, my body remembering every lesson, every correction, every moment of growth. The boys watched in stunned silence as I flowed from one technique to another, each movement building on the last in a display of controlled power. When I finished, I stood in the ready position for a moment longer, breathing steadily, my eyes fixed on theirs. Then I relaxed and picked up my backpack. "That's karate," I said simply. "Not entertainment. Not a performance. It's a martial art that requires discipline, respect, and years of dedicated practice." Tyler's mouth was hanging open. Jake looked like he had seen a ghost. The third boy was staring at me with something that might have been fear or respect. I couldn't tell which. I had no idea," Jake stammered. "No," I agreed. "You didn't." I walked away from them, leaving them standing there in the street. As I turned the corner toward my house, I heard one of them whisper, "Holy shit, she's the real deal." But instead of feeling satisfied, I felt a growing sense of unease. I had given them exactly what they wanted, proof that I was everything they had suspected. The quiet black girl who was secretly dangerous. The outsider who couldn't be trusted. The other who didn't belong. When I got home, I went straight to my room and closed the door. I sat on my bed and stared at my hands, thinking about what I had just done. Had I defended myself and my integrity? Or had I played right into their hands? I thought about Sensei Williams and what he would say about my actions. He had always taught that martial arts should be used for self-defense, not to prove a point or show off. But he had also taught that sometimes you have to stand up for yourself, even if it's uncomfortable. That evening at dinner, my parents could tell something was wrong. "How was school today, sweetheart?" my mother asked. "Fine," I said, not meeting her eyes. "Maya," my father said gently, "you know you can talk to us about anything, right?" I looked up at him, at both of them, and suddenly I felt like I was going to cry. They had worked so hard to give me opportunities, to raise me to be strong and confident, to prepare me for a world that might not always be kind to me. And here I was, struggling with the very challenges they had tried to protect me from. "I think I made a mistake today," I said quietly. "What kind of mistake?" my mother asked. I told them about the encounter with Jake and the other boys, about the demonstration I had given, about the growing tension at school. As I spoke, I watched their faces carefully, looking for disappointment or anger. Instead, I saw understanding. "Baby," my mother said when I finished, "you've been carrying this burden alone for weeks. That's not fair to you." "But I shouldn't have let them provoke me," I said. "I should have just walked away." "Maybe," my father said. "But you also shouldn't have to hide who you are or what you're capable of. There's a difference between showing off and refusing to be diminished." "What do you mean?" "I mean that sometimes people need to see that you're not going to be pushed around. That you have strength and dignity and you're not going to let anyone take that away from you." My mother nodded. "Your father's right. But Maya, you also need to be smart about this. These kids are testing you, trying to see how far they can push you before you break. And now that they know you're not helpless, they might push even harder. So what do I do?" "You stay true to yourself," my father said. "You don't let them change who you are, but you also don't let them walk all over you. And if things get worse, you tell us immediately. We didn't move here for you to be miserable." That night, I lay in bed thinking about their words. I thought about the look on Jake's face when he realized I wasn't bluffing. I thought about Marcus and whether he was dealing with similar challenges. I thought about all the other students who might be watching to see how I handled this situation. And I realized that this was about more than just me. This was about what it meant to be different in a place that wasn't used to difference. It was about standing up not just for myself, but for anyone who had ever been made to feel less than. The next morning, I woke up with a new sense of purpose. I wasn't going to hide anymore. I wasn't going to try to make myself smaller to make others comfortable. I was going to be exactly who I was, with all the strength and dignity my parents and grandparents had instilled in me. I just didn't know that my biggest test was still coming. The defining moment came on a Wednesday afternoon during lunch period. I was sitting at my usual table, reading a book about journalism while eating my sandwich, when I heard a commotion near the entrance to the cafeteria. Marcus was there, cornered by Brittany and her friends again. But this time, Jake and several other boys had joined them, creating a larger circle around the frightened freshman. "Come on, Marcus," Brittany was saying loudly enough for half the cafeteria to hear. "Maya showed us her karate moves the other day. We want to see what you can do." "I told you I don't know karate," Marcus said, his voice shaking. "That's weird," Jake chimed in. "I mean, Maya's been teaching you, right? You two are always together." This was a lie, of course. Marcus and I had barely spoken since the incident the previous week. But the implication was clear. They were trying to create a narrative that all the black students at the school were somehow connected, that we were planning something together. "We're not always together," Marcus said. "We don't even know each other." "Oh, come on," one of Brittany's friends said. "Don't be modest. We heard you two have been practicing together after school. Some kind of martial arts club." The cafeteria had gone almost completely quiet. Hundreds of students were watching this unfold, some with curiosity, others with discomfort, many with their phones out recording. I stood up from my table, my decision made. "That's enough," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. The circle turned to look at me as I approached. I could see the satisfaction in Brittany's eyes. She had been hoping to draw me into this confrontation. "Maya," she said with fake enthusiasm. "Perfect timing. We were just asking Marcus about the karate lessons you've been giving him." "I haven't been giving him any lessons," I said firmly. "And you know that." "Really?" Jake said with a smirk. "Then why were you two whispering together in the hallway yesterday?" Another lie. I had said hello to Marcus in passing, nothing more. But I realized that they had been watching us, waiting for any interaction they could twist into something sinister. "We said hello," I replied. "That's what polite people do." "Come on, Maya," Brittany pressed. "We're all friends here. You can tell us the truth. Are you teaching the younger black kids how to fight?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. She was trying to make me look like I was recruiting others, like I was some kind of threat to the school's safety. And she was doing it in front of an audience, with cameras recording, ensuring that whatever happened next would be seen by everyone. I looked at Marcus, who was trembling now. I looked at the crowd of students watching us like we were entertainment. I looked at Brittany's smug expression and Jake's expectant grin. And I made a choice. "You want to know what I've been teaching him?" I said, my voice carrying across the silent cafeteria. "I've been teaching him the same thing my grandmother taught me. That dignity isn't something you can take from someone, it's something you give to yourself." I stepped closer to the circle and several students automatically moved back. "You want to know about karate?" I continued. "Let me tell you what it really teaches. It teaches you that real strength comes from discipline, not from bullying people smaller than you. It teaches you that respect is earned, not demanded. And it teaches you that the most powerful person in the room is often the one who chooses not to use their power." Brittany's smile faltered slightly. "Maya, we're just having fun here. You don't need to get so serious." "Fun?" I repeated. "Humiliating a freshman in front of the entire school is fun? Making racist assumptions about people based on their skin color is fun? Creating lies about secret martial arts clubs is fun?" The word racist seemed to electrify the crowd. Several students gasped and I saw phones being raised higher to capture the moment. "Racist?" Brittany said, her voice rising. "I'm not racist. I was just asking questions. Questions like, do all black people know karate? Questions like, are you two planning something together? Questions that assume we're all the same person just because we share the same skin color?" I could see that I had hit a nerve. Brittany's face was flushing red, and her friends were looking uncomfortable. "You're being ridiculous," she said. "I never said anything about race." "You didn't have to," I replied. "It's been there in every interaction we've had since the day I arrived. The assumptions, the stereotypes, the way you talk about my hair, my background, my interests. The way you automatically assume Marcus and I must be friends just because we're both black." The cafeteria was dead silent now. Even the lunch staff had stopped working to watch this confrontation unfold. "And you know what's really interesting?" I continued. "You keep asking me to prove myself, to demonstrate my skills, to show you what I can do. But you never ask the white students to prove themselves. You never corner Jake and demand that he show you his basketball moves. You never surround Sarah and insist she demonstrate her piano skills. I took another step forward and Brittany instinctively stepped back. You want to see what I'm really capable of? I asked. You want to see what 9 years of martial arts training has taught me? The crowd leaned in, expecting some kind of physical demonstration. Instead, I turned to Marcus. Marcus, I said gently, are you okay? He nodded, still shaking slightly. Good, I said. Because here's what I learned from karate. The strongest person isn't the one who can knock you down. It's the one who can help you stand back up. I extended my hand to him. After a moment's hesitation, he took it, and I helped him gather his scattered belongings. The strongest person isn't the one who fights the most battles, I continued, addressing the entire cafeteria now. It's the one who knows which battles are worth fighting. I looked directly at Brittany. And this battle, this pathetic attempt to make me and Marcus feel small so you can feel big, this isn't worth fighting. Because you're not worth fighting. You're just scared. Scared? Brittany laughed, but it sounded forced. What would I be scared of? You're scared that the world is changing. You're scared that people who don't look like you or talk like you might have something valuable to offer. You're scared that your little bubble of privilege might not protect you forever. And most of all, you're scared that deep down you're not nearly as special as you think you are. The silence that followed was deafening. Several students had their mouths open in shock. Even Jake looked like he didn't know what to say. So here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice calm but carrying absolute authority. You're going to leave Marcus alone. You're going to stop spreading rumors about secret martial arts clubs. You're going to stop making assumptions about people based on their race. And you're going to find better ways to spend your time than tormenting freshmen. You can't tell me what to do, Brittany said, but her voice lacked conviction. I'm not telling you what to do, I replied. I'm telling you what's going to happen. Because if you continue this behavior, I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly who you really are. And trust me, you don't want that kind of attention. I turned to address the crowd one more time. For anyone who's been enjoying this little show, I said, my voice carrying to every corner of the cafeteria, let me be clear, I'm not your entertainment. Marcus isn't your entertainment. We're not here to perform for you or to prove ourselves to you. We're here to get an education just like everyone else. I looked around the room, making eye contact with as many students as possible. And if you think what just happened here was about karate or martial arts or any of that nonsense, you missed the point entirely. This was about respect. This was about dignity. This was about standing up for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable. I picked up my backpack and helped Marcus with his books. Come on, Marcus, I said. Let's go somewhere where we can finish our lunch in peace. As we walked toward the exit, I heard the whispers starting behind us. But for the first time since arriving at Millbrook High, I didn't care what they were saying. I had spoken my truth, stood up for myself and for Marcus, and done it with the dignity and strength my parents and grandparents had taught me. But as we reached the doors to the cafeteria, I heard Brittany's voice one more time, loud enough for everyone to hear. This isn't over, Maya. You think you're so tough but you're not. And now everyone knows it. I stopped walking and turned back to face her one last time. Brittany, I said with a small smile, I think you're confused about something. I never said I was tough. I said I was strong. And there's a big difference. I paused, making sure she understood what I was about to say. Tough breaks under pressure. Strong bends without breaking. Tough lashes out when threatened. Strong stands firm in the face of adversity. Tough tries to prove itself to others. Strong knows its own worth. I looked around the cafeteria one more time. I don't need to prove anything to any of you. I know who I am. I know what I'm capable of. And I know that I deserve to be treated with respect, not because I can fight, but because I'm a human being. With that, Marcus and I walked out of the cafeteria together, leaving behind a room full of stunned students and one very shaken bully. As the doors closed behind us, I heard Marcus whisper, "That was the most amazing thing I've ever seen." I smiled. That wasn't karate, Marcus. That was something much more powerful. What? That was the truth. The days following the cafeteria confrontation were unlike anything I had experienced at Millbrook High. The video of the incident had spread throughout the school within hours, and by the next morning, it seemed like everyone had seen it. But something unexpected happened. Instead of making me more of an outcast, my stand against Brittany and her friends had earned me respect from students I had never even spoken to. During the first period, a girl named Ashley approached me at my locker. "Maya," she said nervously, I just wanted to say, what you did yesterday was really brave. Thank you, I said, surprised by the compliment. I mean it, she continued. Brittany and her friends have been bullying people for years, and nobody ever stood up to them like that. You said things that needed to be said. Throughout the day, similar interactions occurred. Students I had never noticed before made eye contact and nodded respectfully. A few even stopped to introduce themselves and express their support. At lunch, something remarkable happened. Instead of sitting alone, I found myself joined by Sarah, then by Marcus, then by several other students who had apparently been waiting for permission to approach me. Is it okay if we sit here? Asked a girl named Jennifer, who I knew from my English class. Of course, I said, gesturing to the empty chairs. I've been wanting to talk to you all semester, she said as she sat down. I don't know, I'm intimidated, I guess. Intimidated by me? I was genuinely confused. Not in a bad way, she said quickly. It's just that you always seemed so confident, so sure of yourself. And after what happened with Brittany? I mean, you handled that better than any adult would have. Marcus nodded in agreement. I've been thinking about what you said. About dignity being something you give to yourself. I never thought about it that way before. My grandmother taught me that, I said. She always said that nobody can make you feel inferior without your permission. That's beautiful, Sarah said. Where did that come from? Eleanor Roosevelt, originally. But my grandmother made it real for me. As we talked, I realized that my confrontation with Brittany had done more than just address the immediate bullying situation. It had opened up conversations about race, about belonging, about what it meant to stand up for yourself and others. Can I ask you something? Jennifer said hesitantly. About the martial arts thing. Do you really have a black belt? I nodded. I do. I've been studying karate since I was 8. That's so cool, she said. I always wanted to learn self-defense, but I was scared I wouldn't be good at it. Fear is normal, I said. But it doesn't have to stop you. My sensei always said that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's feeling the fear and doing what's right anyway. Is that what you did yesterday? Marcus asked. Feel the fear and do it anyway? I thought about it for a moment. Yes, I think so. I was terrified, actually. But I was more afraid of what would happen if I didn't speak up. Not just to me but to you and to anyone else who might be watching. The conversation continued throughout lunch, covering everything from martial arts philosophy to college plans to favorite books. For the first time since arriving at Millbrook, I felt like I was having the kind of meaningful conversations I had missed from my old school. After school, I was walking to my locker when I noticed a group of teachers talking quietly near the main office. As I approached, I heard fragments of their conversation. The most mature handling of a difficult situation I've seen from a student. Showed real leadership. Parents should be proud. Mrs. Henderson, my English teacher, noticed me and approached. Maya, she said with a warm smile, could I speak with you for a moment? Of course, Mrs. Henderson. I wanted you to know that what you did yesterday, the way you handled that situation, was remarkable. You showed wisdom and maturity beyond your years. Thank you, I said, feeling a flush of pride. I also wanted to let you know that Principal Martinez wants to meet with you tomorrow morning. Nothing punitive, she added quickly, seeing my concerned expression. He wants to discuss some opportunities he thinks you might be interested in. What kind of opportunities? Well, we've been looking for someone to help with our peer mediation program. And there's talk of starting a diversity and inclusion club. Based on what we witnessed yesterday, we think you might be exactly the kind of leader we need. I felt a surge of excitement. These were the kinds of activities I had been hoping to get involved in, but I hadn't known how to approach them as a new student. I'd be very interested in both of those things, I said. Excellent. And Maya? Mrs. Henderson paused. I hope you know that not everyone at this school shares the attitudes you encountered from those students. Many of us have been watching you since you arrived, and we've been impressed by your grace, your intelligence, and your strength. As I walked home that afternoon, I reflected on how much had changed in just 24 hours. The confrontation with Brittany had been difficult and emotionally draining, but it had also been liberating. I had finally stopped trying to make myself smaller to fit in, and instead had shown everyone exactly who I was. When I got home, my parents were waiting for me in the living room. They had obviously heard about the incident. News travels fast in small towns. How are you feeling, sweetheart? My mother asked as I sat down beside her. Honestly? Better than I have since we moved here, I said. We heard about what happened at school, my father said. Are you okay? I'm okay, Dad. Actually, I'm more than okay. I think I finally found my voice. I told them about the conversation with Mrs. Henderson, about the students who had approached me with support, about the lunch conversation with Marcus and the others. "I'm proud of you, Maya," my mother said, tears in her eyes. "You handled that situation with such dignity and strength." "I was so scared," I admitted. "But I kept thinking about what you and Grandma taught me. About standing up for what's right, even when it's hard." "That's exactly what you did," my father said. "And you did it in a way that honored yourself and your family." That evening, I called my grandmother to tell her about everything that had happened. "Baby," she said after I finished the story, "I am so proud of you I could burst. You didn't just stand up for yourself. You stood up for that boy and for anyone else who might be facing similar challenges. I kept thinking about what you said about showing people who you are instead of telling them. And you did exactly that. You showed them that you're strong, that you're dignified, that you're not going to be pushed around. But you also showed them that you're compassionate and wise. That's the kind of person who changes the world." "I hope so, Grandma. I hope I can make a difference here." "You already have, sweetheart. You already have." The next morning, I met with Principal Martinez as Mrs. Henderson had arranged. He was a kind man in his 50s who had been principal at Millbrook High for over a decade. "Maya," he said as I sat down in his office, "I wanted to thank you for how you handled the situation yesterday. I know it couldn't have been easy." "Thank you, sir. I just did what I thought was right. And you did it in a way that was mature and responsible. I'll be honest with you, we've been dealing with some of these issues for a while, and we haven't always handled them as well as we should have." He leaned forward in his chair. "I'd like to ask for your help. We're implementing some new programs focused on inclusion and peer mediation, and I think you would be perfect to help lead these initiatives." "I'd be honored to help, sir." "Excellent. And Maya? I want you to know that if you ever face any more problems like this, you can come directly to me. You shouldn't have to handle these situations alone." As I left his office, I felt a sense of hope that I hadn't experienced since arriving at Millbrook. I wasn't just going to survive at this school, I was going to thrive. And maybe, just maybe, I could help make it a better place for other students who felt like outsiders. The rest of the week passed in a blur of new conversations, new friendships, and new opportunities. The Diversity and Inclusion Club was approved, and I was asked to be one of the founding members. The peer mediation program was eager to have me as a volunteer. Even my teachers seemed to see me differently, calling on me more in class and asking for my opinions on various topics. But the most meaningful change was in my relationship with Marcus. We had started eating lunch together regularly, and I had begun to see him as more than just someone I had helped. He was becoming a real friend. "You know what's funny?" he said one day as we sat in the cafeteria. "I was so embarrassed about what happened that first day. I thought everyone would think I was weak because I couldn't stand up to them. And now I realize that it's not about being able to fight. It's about being able to stand up for yourself and others, even when it's scary. You taught me that. You taught yourself that," I corrected. "You just needed someone to show you it was possible." As we talked, I looked around the cafeteria and realized how different it felt now. I wasn't the isolated new girl anymore. I was part of a community, someone who belonged and who had something to contribute. Brittany and her friends still attended the school, of course, but their influence had diminished significantly. Word had spread about what had happened, and their behavior was no longer tolerated the way it had been before. They kept to themselves mostly, and when they did interact with me, it was with a grudging respect. I had learned something important about power, that it wasn't about being able to physically intimidate someone. True power comes from standing up for your principles, from speaking truth to prejudice, from refusing to be diminished by others' fears and insecurities. My karate training had given me the confidence to stand up for myself, but it was my voice, my words, my refusal to be silenced that had actually changed things. And I knew that this was just the beginning. As I sit here now, 6 months after that confrontation in the cafeteria, I can see how much my life has changed. The Diversity and Inclusion Club I helped start has grown to over 50 members. The peer mediation program has successfully resolved dozens of conflicts. And I've built friendships that I know will last long after high school. But more than that, I've learned something fundamental about what it means to be strong in this world. For years, I thought strength meant being able to defend yourself physically. I thought it meant being tough enough to handle whatever came your way without showing vulnerability. I thought it meant proving yourself to others and earning their respect through demonstrations of power. I was wrong. True strength isn't about what you can do to others, it's about what you refuse to let others do to you. It's not about proving your worth to people who don't value you, it's about knowing your worth regardless of their opinion. It's not about fighting every battle, It's about choosing the battles that matter and fighting them with dignity. The day I stood up to Brittany and her friends wasn't about karate or martial arts or physical confrontation. It was about something much more powerful: the refusal to be diminished. The refusal to let others' prejudices define who I was or what I was capable of. The refusal to stay silent when silence would have been easier. I learned that racism isn't always obvious. It's not always burning crosses or explicit slurs. Sometimes it's in the assumptions people make about you. Sometimes it's in the way they expect you to prove yourself while others are accepted at face value. Sometimes it's in the way they reduce you to stereotypes and expect you to perform those stereotypes for their entertainment. But I also learned that racism loses its power when you refuse to internalize it. When you know who you are and what you're capable of, when you understand that their prejudices say more about them than they do about you, when you speak your truth with courage and dignity, that's when you reclaim your power. My grandmother was right when she said that sometimes you have to show people who you are instead of telling them. But the showing isn't about physical demonstrations or proving your skills. It's about demonstrating your character, your values, your refusal to be anything less than your authentic self. The karate moves I learned were useful, but they weren't what changed my situation at Millbrook High. What changed everything was finding my voice, speaking my truth, and refusing to be silenced by others' discomfort with my presence. I think about Marcus often and how he's grown since that day in the cafeteria. He's more confident now, more willing to speak up when he sees injustice. He's learned that being small doesn't mean being powerless, and that sometimes the most important battles are fought with words, not fists. I think about the other students at Millbrook who have reached out to me since that day, students who felt like outsiders for different reasons, who needed someone to show them that it was possible to stand up for yourself with dignity. The overweight girl who was being body shamed. The quiet boy who was being bullied for his interest. The immigrant student who was being mocked for his accent. Each of them taught me something new about strength, about resilience, about the power of standing together against injustice. And yes, I still practice karate. I found a new dojo in town and I continue to train and grow in the art. But I understand now that the most important lessons martial arts taught me weren't about fighting, they were about discipline, about respect, about the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you can handle whatever life throws at you. I've learned that you don't have to be loud to be strong. You don't have to be aggressive to be powerful. You don't have to prove yourself to be valuable. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is simply refuse to be anyone other than who you are. My parents were right when they said I didn't have to shrink myself to make others comfortable. My grandmother was right when she said dignity is something you give to yourself. And Sensei Williams was right when he taught me that martial arts are about living, not fighting. But I was the one who had to learn how to put those lessons into practice. I was the one who had to find the courage to speak up, to stand firm, to refuse to be diminished. I was the one who had to discover that my voice was more powerful than my fists, that my character was more important than others' opinions, that my dignity was non-negotiable. To anyone who has ever felt like an outsider, who has ever been judged for their appearance or their background or their differences, I want you to know this: you are not alone. You are not less than. You are not required to prove yourself to anyone who doesn't value you. Your strength doesn't come from what you can do to others, it comes from what you refuse to let others do to you. Your worth isn't determined by their acceptance, it's inherent in who you are. Your voice matters, your truth matters, your presence in this world matters. The bullies and the prejudiced and the small-minded, they want you to shrink, to hide, to disappear. They want you to internalize their hatred and turn it against yourself. They want you to believe that their opinion of you is more important than your opinion of yourself. Don't give them that power. Stand up. Speak up. Show up as your authentic self, with all your strength and dignity and worth. Not because you have to prove anything to them, but because you deserve to take up space in this world. Because your voice deserves to be heard. Because your story deserves to be told. They judged me by my skin color. They tried to reduce me to their stereotypes. They expected me to either disappear or explode. Instead, I showed them the strength of my soul. I showed them that I was more than their narrow minds could comprehend. I showed them that dignity and grace and truth are more powerful than hatred and prejudice and fear. And in doing so, I didn't just change my own life, I changed theirs too. I forced them to confront their own assumptions, their own biases, their own limitations. I made them reckon with the fact that their worldview was too small to contain the fullness of who I am. That's the real power of standing up for yourself. It's not about defeating others, it's about refusing to be defeated by them. It's about living your truth so authentically that others have no choice but to expand their understanding of what's possible. The world needs your voice. It needs your perspective. It needs your strength and your wisdom and your unique way of seeing things. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Be proud of who you are. Be proud of where you come from. Be proud of the struggles you've overcome and the strength you've developed. Be proud of your right to exist in this world exactly as you are. And remember, they can judge you by your appearance, but they cannot diminish the power of your spirit. They can try to stereotype you, but they cannot contain the fullness of who you are. They can attempt to silence you, but they cannot stop the truth from being spoken. You are stronger than their hatred. You are more valuable than their opinions. You are more powerful than their prejudices. Never let them convince you otherwise. Stand tall. Speak your truth. Show them the strength of your soul. The world is waiting to hear your voice.